Confessed NSA leaker Edward Snowden's whereabouts are unknown. Former CIA employee may have checked out of a Hong Kong hotel today after being holed up there for days, and he's since slipped off the radar. We'll have that and more right here, right now on the News Hub. Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Simon Constable. Joining us now from Washington is the Wall Street Journal's Washington Bureau Chief Jerry Seib. Jerry, the whereabouts of Edward Snowden unknown, but the world is reacting today about his identity, and there's a White House petition gathering steam to pardon him. How does the White House respond to this?
Well, they're responding carefully. You know, it's a difficult problem because they've been in some hot water in the administration for pursuing leaks too aggressively, particularly in the case of journalists. They'd preferred this not to have happened at this particular moment, obviously, and I think they have to wait and see. It's a tricky situation because why he chose to go to Hong Kong, which does have an extradition treaty with the U.S., is a little bit of a mystery to a lot of people, including to me. So it might be wise for him to move on if he wants to avoid extradition to the U.S. and get out of Hong Kong. Whether that's what's happened or not, I'm not sure. I think the White House position is, look, damage has been done here. We think leaks are harmful for national security. We'll let the question of what happens to this particular leaker sort itself out a little bit.
And quickly, Jerry, does intent have anything to do with it? If the leak is damaging, but the intent was to stir up a debate about the surveillance, does that sort of mitigate what he may have done here?
You know, I don't think the people in the national security establishment would consider that a mitigating factor at all, and they're the people who go to the Justice Department. And in fact, I've already gone to the Justice Department and said, we're asking for a leak investigation. That's how the law enforcement machinery gets rolling, and I don't think that anybody in that process is going to consider your intent to be a mitigating factor. The public might, and you mentioned the petition drive, and there's going to be a fair amount of support for this guy out among people who think these kinds of questions ought to be put on the table in a public way. But that doesn't mean the people who are in charge of the law enforcement apparatus are going to see things that way at all.
Okay, you wrote your column about the NSA and what this leak tells us about how our president is really one of paradoxes. Explain what you meant.
Yeah. Well, I think lots of presidents tend to be men of paradoxes. They have complicated jobs and they don't move in straight lines. And what's striking to me about this episode is that people look at this NSA surveillance, you know, the gathering of phone records on Americans and monitoring of internet communications among foreigners, and they're sort of shocked to know that Barack Obama, former constitutional law instructor at the University of Chicago, civil libertarian, has actually been overseeing policies, perhaps growing policies in the intelligence surveillance world that impinge on civil liberties. But that's the way the world works. It's a complicated world for every president, and all presidents are full of paradoxes. You know, that's how Richard Nixon, the leading anti-communist crusader of his time, became the guy who paved the way toward a rapprochement with communist China. You know, you had Franklin Roosevelt, son of the upper class, spend most of his time in office excoriating the upper class. And conditions change. You know, George W. Bush came into office saying he was skeptical about nation-building exercises abroad for the U.S., yet he then ended up leading the two biggest nation-building exercises the country's ever undertaken, or at least since the end of World War II, in Iraq and Afghanistan. Sometimes it's circumstances, sometimes it's simply because people maybe read too much into what they think their president is telling them.
And is that the issue there with President Obama? Are they more likely to be surprised because they're seeing things that truly aren't there?
Well, I think people have projected on President Obama in some cases, and I write about this in the column, what they think he ought to be doing. You know, liberals think he ought to be for gay marriage, yet it took him 4 years to come out in favor of gay marriage. Conservatives suspect he's going to bail out on the Afghan war, yet while he does shut down the Iraq war, he sends a troop surge into Afghanistan early in his first term. I think people have tended to project what they think Barack Obama is about onto Barack Obama, and perhaps they ought to listen more carefully to what he says sometimes.
Okay, interesting stuff. Great column as always. Jerry Seib of the Wall Street Journal. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Simon. Appreciate it.